And here we are, folks, the final build of pack number 19. It always seems to come around pretty quick, and like I said, we've left one of the more interesting ones until last. Typically I would start the week with something like this, but I thought let's change it up a little bit. And of course it is a build, kind of a sort of replica, but not quite, and I'll get more into why in a second, of the real-world Aston Vantage GT4. Now there are loads of variations of this idea. You could do a Group 4, you could do a GT4, which are similar, but of course in Gran Turismo terms those are different things. What I've opted to do is basically go for more of the 2024 Vantage GT4 in terms of specs, the one with the even bigger gaping grille on the front, but then with the visual style of the earlier one. So, like I said, it's kind of a replica of two cars at the same time, but not really fully authentic to either of them. So if you're an absolute purist, you probably won't love it. But I guess you could just go for different visuals. That would be the easier way of the two if you do want to go for that. And for what this particular player has done, you can actually change the colour anyway. So I opted to go for, I can't remember what the colour was, black pearl I think, or something like that. One of the black Aston Martin colours, because I think it suits the car, with just a hint of blue I think it is in there, at least to my eye. So like I said, you can go for pretty much whatever livery you want to, if this one's too minimal for you, or whatever the case may be. As far as the bits, it's actually pretty simple. 680 points, so well within cash cow limits. 4 litre of course still, 1465 kilos, which from what I could find is the 2024 specs, with 470 horses. So once again, running to those newer 2024 numbers. You want stage 1 weight. Just to jump into the ultimate section first, you don't need to worry about any of that, like counteracting lower stuff. So stage 1 weight there. Of course, the sports hards are already on anyway. For the club sports section, we've got the power restrictor and the ballast. Surprisingly, no more weight loss, because, you know, GT4 isn't crazy on weight, so you don't actually need to do all that much unless you want to significantly change the weight distribution, I guess, which obviously we're not doing here. For the ECU, that is fitted in the fully customised form, the limited slip diff as well. I haven't bothered with the body rigidity on this one. It doesn't make any difference to points, as you can see. You could go for it, but of course that is a one-way thing. So, seemed to me to be just kind of unnecessary, and as it turns out, I would say the handling means it is unnecessary. It's more than good enough anyway. I've gone for the racing silencer, because of course, even though we're technically running less power, you've got to have that right look and that right sound, so I did make that exception. We've gone the racing padway and the racing drilled discs. Of course, you could go for the slotted, you could even go for ceramics. You could probably make a pretty good argument for having ceramics on it, actually, if you wanted to. Of course, the racing clutch and flywheel, the transmission, the suspension. I have opted for racing hard tyres, pretty obviously, for this one. If you find it too much, if you want to use it for a lower level, absolutely go for, you know, sports hard, sports softs, whatever you want to use. For the extreme stuff, the steering angle adapter, of course, for the turn-in. And this is a funny one, because when I reviewed this car, when, 1.57 dropped, I think that we got this car, it was awesome. I thought it was fantastic through corners. And then 1.58 came around, and it ruined it. The car got super heavy, really twitchy, as many cars have with the bottoming out suspension problem. Thankfully, this overcomes that again, but the steering angle adapter is part of the reason why I've done that, to kind of overcome that heaviness which they've added to a lot of cars. And then for the extreme stuff, you don't need to worry about that, as I already showed you. So, to jump back into the home garage and show you the minor tweaks which we've done, thankfully the car is already so good to work with that you don't really need to go too crazy in terms of a lot of spec. Or a lot of settings, I should say. So we've got the racing hards, of course, on there. For the suspension, 85mm, so it's fairly low, but thankfully it's not too low to upset the apple cart on handling. 6 for the anti-roll, 25 and 35 for the dampers, 3.35 for the springs, so very stiff on that one. 1.5 degrees of camber, so nothing too crazy. Certainly for a racing build, you'd expect more like maybe 3 degrees in many cases. Doesn't need it on this one, though. As far as toe, it's towed out. 0.10 on the front, in 20 on the rear. 10, 30 and 20. Surprise, surprise, it works really well again, as it has with many cars this week. 300 kilometers an hour on the auto setting for this one. Of course, you've got plenty of gears to work with, and it gets through them pretty quick, especially with the sequential racing transmission, but it kind of feels right, you know, 470 horses with about 190 miles an hour-ish, or a little bit more on the ratios. That's a pretty good combination to have. Certainly with less horsepower than it started with, at least. You want 104 kilos of ballast. I've opted to leave that in the middle because it's already a 50-50, so why change it if you don't need to? 84% on power to get those real-world numbers, or close enough. I think it was like 469, I think, so it's close enough. And then for this one, I decided, you know what, it's more of a cornering machine anyway, so we'll go maximum downforce, as I usually would for these more race car kind of builds, and you can change that as and when you need to. And over here, of course, everything which we've done. So a pretty simple build, like I said, nothing too crazy. We're actually making it less powerful, of course, than it was to begin with, and naturally, you can't talk about a car like this without jumping out to the track. That's exactly what we'll do. Now, this one is definitely a good way to end the week, I would say, because it's a vehicle which, as I said, initially I loved, and then it got kind of weird. A few people were saying saying that they didn't like it when they watched the video a bit later on, or I heard comments saying like, oh, it's too heavy, I don't like handling, and I was like, what are you talking about? This is great through corners, even with 800 horsepower. And then I kind of understood why. It seems almost like sometimes updates affect different people differently on their individual game or something, but once 1.58 came around, yeah, it definitely changed the car and it wasn't as good. Now though, it's a lot of fun again. You could, if you wanted to, kind of riff on this and put it all the way up to, 6, 7, 800 horses if you wanted to, and it should be a fairly foolproof way of handling the power again. This one, of course, is more on the replica side, but as with many of my builds, you could definitely use it as a canvas and then pretty much build it up or down as you want to. So, if you decided to join me on this journey again for pack number 19, that's 190 cars now, then of course I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully, sometime maybe over this weekend, or because I'll record these videos a little bit ahead of time, we may have seen it earlier today. You never know, because last month we saw on Friday instead of the weekend the new silhouette teasers, so maybe that'll happen here. Tell me down below if it did, and of course either Saturday or Sunday, hopefully we'll see something if we haven't already. But I'll see you next time with more, hopefully for whatever Polyphony brings us this month, and thanks for watching.